Hello people, and welcome to a City Skylines mod tutorial. You guys have been asking for a tier list of the mods, but I don't think a tier list is quite the right format for the mods. So instead, what I thought we could do is my top 10 quality of life and game engine improvement mods. Mods that I've come across since I started playing modded about a couple of months ago. And these also include things I think should be in the game engine that vastly improve your day-to-day and minute-to-minute gameplay experience in City Skylines. These are, of course, based on my own personal opinion, and I am trying to keep them fairly lightweight, so there's going to be no node controller here, no intersection marking tool, definitely no procedural objects. So if I've missed out your favourite mod, please don't be offended. These are my own personal top 10 mods to get started with beginner modding for City Skylines. And let's try and turn the comment section into a helpful area where we can suggest and help people that are new to mods get to grips with the modded game a little bit easier. Otherwise, let's get started, shall we? So before you even load into a map, once you've downloaded your mods from the Steam Workshop, you need to come into Content Manager. On the left here, you have an option for mods, and then every mod that you have downloaded will appear in this list. To enable it, you simply just hit the little on and off icon here. It will fill blue, and then the mod is now active. If you want to see what mods you have active, you can sort all by enabled, and then all of your currently enabled ones will appear at the top of the list. So, this is how you turn mods on in City Skylines. Let's go ahead and dive into a city. So, all of the mods we're talking about today will be in an individual collection linked down below. If you want to come and grab them all, then you can find them in the description. Otherwise, the first one we're going to talk about is MoveIt. Once it is installed, you will see this icon in the bottom right next to your bulldozer icon. Click on it, and this is your initial interface. Automatically, the single selection tool will be applied by default. And MoveIt does exactly that. It moves things. You can click on anything you want and drag it around. It can be a node on a bridge. Obviously you wouldn't do this, but it shows the power of it off, okay? So any node, any sort of prop, network, detailing, so anything that you select with MoveIt can be dragged around to your own desire. Of course, if you are moving a commercial lot, it still does need to have a road connection, so just be wary of that if you're planning to move a lot of commercial or residential industrial buildings. So the next tool along our MoveIt toolbar is the marquee selection. Clicking this will allow you to draw out exactly that, a marquee, and it will select everything that is ticked within these boxes here. This box also expands into roads, tracks, paths, fences, power lines, and others. And you can double click the picker icon at the top. You can also use the picker to directly choose something if you'd like. But say, for example, if I wanted to just grab all the trees in a particular area, then just by selecting only trees under the marquee selection, I will grab only the trees. You can also right-click to deselect anything that you have highlighted with MoveIt. Same thing again will work with nodes. If I want to grab every node, then it's going to do that for me. And again, right-clicking is going to get rid of it. Next one is a copy function. This will also work with Control and C on your keyboard, as with every other sort of program on the PC. If you're on the Windows, that is. I'm not entirely sure what the control is for Mac. But this will do exactly what it says. If you highlight a particular asset, and then you do Control and C, it is going to copy that asset, and then you can place it down. It is worth noting that if you do copy an asset via this method, you don't actually end up paying for the duplicated asset. It is free. And it's also a nice way of doing this with unique buildings as well. If you want to have more than one unique building, for example, I have my School of Engineering in the campus. I can just select it with MoveIt, Control and C, or you can select it and then hit the copy function. It's the same thing. And then you have another School of Engineering that you can place down. Okay, so really cool functionality for copying assets. MoveIt also has a bulldoze function, which you might think, well, what's the point? When the game already has a bulldoze function, it's because we can bulldoze anything. So, for example, if we try to bulldoze a full graveyard in the vanilla game, it won't let us because we have to empty it out first. Now, of course, you can use the Natural Disasters DLC Collapse Building Disaster in order to get rid of the graveyard quicker. But if you do have MoveIt, you can simply select it, hit the little bulldoze icon, and it will just go away. And then you can, of course, just replace your graveyard as you need. So the final one here, this is where MoveIt's functionality really expands. And if you want to learn everything here, this is where I would suggest you go and see Slay3K's video, which is linked down below. It is a full, 20-minute video, totally dedicated to everything MoveIt can do. It's easily the best MoveIt tutorial on YouTube. But I went over some simple things that will help you here. So let's go and find a few nodes, shall we? Look, actually, I can see a perfect example here. See how this is, that key just slightly moves down, right? It's not quite perfectly level. I grab the node on the end of the key there. So once I have that node selected, I can come into the toolbox, come up to object height, and then when this is selected here, you'll see it says height tools. You want to click on another node that you want to set your selected node to. So select it to this one. Boom. You see how it very does slightly jumps up, and then it's going to get rid of that little sort of dip that we had in the key. Now this exact same process about setting things to the same height can also be done with a shortcut, so we'll do the same thing again with this elevated zoo path here. I want these two nodes that are higher than the rest of the bridge to be at the same height as these nodes here. So instead of using this option, you can just hit Ctrl and H on your keyboard. You will notice that the tool activates. You select the node, you want everything to be at that height, and then boom, it goes down, and you're going to get a nice flat bridge straight across. Immensely handy for sorting out road networks that aren't playing particularly friendly with the terrain, and indeed sort of bridge networks like this that are going over water, where they're a little bit lumpy and bumpy. With the vanilla mechanic, MoveIt can sort that. So another really useful application of MoveIt for beginners is its slope function. Like we can see here, okay, I have this highway interchange that was built totally vanilla, and you can see it's got a touch of jank with some of the slopes. It's not quite as even as you would like it to be. So let's come in and select multiple nodes again by holding shift. And the nodes are represented by the circles as well. If it's a long blue section like this, it's a segment. You want to make sure you're selecting the nodes, not the segments. And then with all the nodes selected, going back into your height tools, there's an option here for slope objects. And once you select this, you'll notice that from the top node down to the bottom one, it will give it a nice smooth slope and totally remove any sort of hideous vanilla jank that you had. Amazingly useful. Network Multi-Tool also has a similar functionality, but is definitely a more complicated mod than MoveIt. So you can also do it with MoveIt if you like. So once you download MoveIt, just come in and start playing with sort of dragging nodes and segments around and just see what you make of the mod. Okay, you can sort of trim up your slip roads here if you want them slightly different angles. Sort of bring it closer into the actual highway itself. Okay, there's, you want to be careful you don't sort of tear the concrete, but vast amounts of applications with MoveIt. And I hope it's something we see in cities too as well. The ability to manipulate nodes and buildings like this and just click and drag anything wherever you want is massively game changing and just allows you to make the slightest little tweaks, even in the vanilla game. So 100% MoveIt should be in your beginner quality of life mod list. Next up for me is absolutely an essential mod for any city these days, and this is the forest brush. So once it is installed, you will get this triplet of conifers appearing on your toolbar next to your policies. Please ignore the names in the top. These are my preset brushes. You guys won't see these. And we have a couple of options here on the top. There's a toggle trees panel, which will get rid of the selectable trees. Settings will remove the brush strength settings and the size and the strength here. And then the brush shape panel will also toggle on here as well. So if you're not seeing all this interface, it's because one of them is toggled off up here. So when the forest brush is selected, you will be able to control the size and the strength of your brush via the size and strength parameters here. And if you right click with this tool, it will delete all trees that it covers. This is insane that this functionality is not in the base game for a PC city sim to have a forest brush like this. I believe the consoles do have a tree brush, but not a forest brush. Because you can place multiple trees at once with the forest brush. So a right click will remove all your trees for you. This is amazing because the alternative for this in the vanilla game is to do this. And on a very heavily treed map, just no thank you. Right? Get the forest brush. So if you want to make your own custom forest, you can come into create a new brush here. We can call it the Noob's Guide Forest. And then it's just a simple case now of ticking whatever trees you want to appear within this forest brush. You can also change the probability of them. This will affect how often this tree spawns when you start to paint it. So I'm going to go for an alder, a California palm, a couple of flower trees. Again, you can customize this to whatever you want, okay? So once you have your forest configured and you're happy with whatever trees are going to spawn in it, set your size and your strength, and then your left click function with this big red circle will start to paint out the forest that you have selected in this window here. It really is amazing. It allows you to create much more diverse kind of forested and woodland areas, and it saves you manually placing thousands of trees across your map. So very customizable. Forest brush for me is an absolute must-have quality of life mod. Definitely go ahead and grab it for yourself. Next up is the prop line tool mod. So any sort of prop or tree or something that doesn't have a node, such as a decal, you can now place down in lines rather than having to manually place them. As you select, say for example, a tree, you will notice that you now have some new tools alongside the bottom left here, which says PLT, which is short for Prop Line Tool. If you click on one of these, a new icon will appear to open up the control panel. Clicking this will bring up this screen here. Might look a little bit complicated at first, but super easy. The only thing you're setting here is your spacing. If you turn off auto default, it will keep it at the value you set. And you can use these values here to increase the spacing, and it is quite literally referring to how deep is the spacing between these assets that you're placing. This mod makes placing in sort of repeated tree patterns vastly easier, and also keeping the same sort of distances and consistencies as well. You can also do the exact same thing with a curve instead and have curved trees, and likewise with a freeform. So it's going to function really similar to kind of your road tools, okay? But a really nice way of placing any props, trees or decals in a nice straight, evenly spaced line. You also have the option to do circles, which you can just draw out, and this will happen with a circle. This is a really nice way of decorating your roundabouts, actually. If you come in and sort of reduce your spacing down to a fairly low amount, you can also get some nice sort of circular bush patterns to sit within a roundabout, if you like, rather than manually placing them. Now the prop line tool also pairs really nicely with prop in Tree Anarchy, but I'll cover this when I get to the Anarchy Mods section of this video. But another really cool function is to come into the linear fence fill. If this option is ticked within your options tab, and then you click this icon down here for fence mode, it will allow you to place any prop you like as a fence. This is especially useful for things from the Part Life DLC, like the hedges, which you would normally have to sort of manually place and line up and try and get them straight. With your fence mode on, and the straight tool is ticked, and then with the correct spacing, you can simply draw them out, and it will create a nice sort of fence fill. This will work for any of them. You can also do it with hedge number 1. So really cool. Also flower beds, any sort of props, right? So from a decoration point of view, the prop line tool is massively helpful. You're going to save so much time placing props like this. And it'll work with anything. Not that you'd really do it with food stalls like this, but you could. And it'll work with anything, right? Any props, any sort of decals that you have. Including the Part Life decals, which again will now come out into a nice straight pattern, which is so much easier than having to do it manually, okay? So when we've come through in the noob's guide and put in kind of all these repeated tree patterns like this, these are all now very easily doable with the prop line tool, right? So we could delete these bushes here, then turn off our fence mode, then I could replace it with some of the new content creator bushes, perhaps, okay? So a really simple and easy to use mod, the prop line tool, allows for much easier and saves you a ton of time with your decorating and repeated patterns. The next mod I think you should be installing as a mod noob is Ultimate Eye Candy, and once installed you'll be greeted with a little sun and cloud icon down here in the bottom right of your screen. Clicking on this will bring up Ultimate Eye Candy. You can manually adjust your time of day and also change your day and night speed as well. So we can set the day speed to 128%, which will make the days fly by. Equally as much, you can change it down to 64th of its regular speed, and your days will be endlessly long. You can also turn it totally off or leave it as normal. The latitude and longitude sliders will control the exact position of your sun. Not that I imagine you guys will get a vast amount of use out of changing the sun position. This is fairly useful for recording in order just to move the shadows onto the right side of a particular building if you want. You can kind of see how it just sort of shifts around. So you can change it if you like, and then you can also adjust global light intensity and ambient light intensity just to try and tweak the graphics of your game a little bit more. And there's also a reset button at the bottom to reset everything back to the game's default. Next tab is weather. You can manually enable weather here and also bring in your rain intensity if you want, and also toggle and untoggle rain motion blur, and also bring your fog intensity in if you want to have some instantaneous weather. The LUT is where you can manually set your LUTs that you download from the workshop. You have the base game ones here, and you just simply select it and hit load. There's many different ones you can download. Some of them will want tweaking, just because they can be sometimes a little bit overexposed. You can kind of come here and amend your light intensities and, you know, come up with a lighting scheme that you like and find a LUT that you enjoy. There are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of LUTs on the workshop. Some of my favourites are the Relight Neutral. Relight Warm is the one that I use for Ilos, and Relight 3 Soft is the one that I use for Palaven. But just download them, see what you think. and you'll find one that suits you. And then once you have everything configured here with your ambient, weather, and LUT tabs, you can actually save these as presets. So you can just hit save as new. We can call this Noob's Guide Lighting. Great. It will appear within your preset list. You can select it and then just hit load preset, and it will preload everything that you've specified within these sliders here. So a nice way to bring a different look to the game and also make it a little bit more realistic as well, especially with the LUTs. And another amazingly handy function of Ultimate Eye Candy is you can now right click the sun and moon radar down here in the bottom left, and it will automatically jump to that time of day. Immensely useful rather than having to come in and adjust your slider like this, okay? Just a little right click around this circle will move the time of day to that exact position. So, Ultimate Eye Candy, really fun, graphically improving mod, and some sort of weather and time of day tweaks in there as well. It's pretty handy. Next up is extra landscaping tools. When you come into your game with this mod active, you can clip into your landscaping and disasters, and you will notice two new tools here. There is a ditch function and a sand function, and your regular 4 vanilla terraforming tools are now much more customizable. You can set their strength and size to be absolutely enormous if you want to level out huge areas of flatland at once. And you'll know that the vanilla game only has 3 preset circles and 3 different strength presets. So you can really start customizing your terraforming with extra landscaping tools. Likewise with the lift as well. If you want to start creating some insane spikes, then you can do. But yeah, it just gives you much more control over the terraforming tools. Definitely worth installing. You can also pick several different sizes of brush to terraform. I have never ever found a use for this. And they have the strangest presets as well. So yeah, it'd be nice if there was kind of a square one. But I'm pretty sure you can. That's kind of essentially, like, it's terrifying, isn't it? Look at that. Oh my word. Yeah, so the brushes aren't massively useful, but if you can find some space for them, then they are there. Better landscaping tools also allows you to manually paint in your natural resources, including ore, oil, and fertile land. So you can just paint them out. You will notice that the color of the ground will change to correspond to that resource. And then when you look at your resources tab, you will notice that you now have an ore pocket and oil and some fertile land over here as well. You can also right-click the resource with the correct resource selected and remove the natural resource if you want. So you no longer have to follow where the preset resources spawn in on your map. You can paint them in wherever you want. So for example, I wanted a big ore field over here. Let's remove some of the oil, again just by right-clicking it. And then I could paint in some of my own ore, and I can now build an ore quarry over this pocket. So very handy for painting in your own resources, exactly where you want them to be. And another great function that comes with extra landscaping tools is the ability to place in your own water sources, and which allows you to place in your own lakes, which is amazing. Okay, so let's just kind of make ourselves a little hole, right? Say this is going to be some sort of, maybe a lake in a park, or you want a lake in a nature reserve, then you can, dig out the hole on the size of the shape in the lake that you want. You can use forest brush to remove all of the trees. And then this little icon down here next to your ground resources is the water source. Pause your game while you place this and I'll walk you through how to use this one, okay? So with this one selected here, the place water source, you want to click it, okay? And if you play the game now, this water source will just spill everywhere and flood. You now want to left click and hold and then drag it up and down, and you will see that faint sort of ghost layer. That is dictating the height of the water that will go to, okay? So as long as it's within the shoreline of your ditch, once you play your game, the water source will spawn in, and it will fill up to that exact level that you specified by clicking and dragging, okay? Again, you can bring it lower just by dragging on it, and if you don't want it anymore, then just right-click it, and it will go away. You will need the water to drain away, so make sure it does have a drainage point if you do get rid of the water source, but otherwise, once it settles, you can now create your own little man-made lakes without having to use basically what we did in the Noob's Guide episode, right, where we kind of cut all this in to let the natural water flow in. You can now make custom lakes with extra landscaping tools. Very good mod, definitely play with it. Next up is 81 tiles, pretty easy one to cover this. Once it is installed, you can come into your game options, and under your mod settings, you're going to find it down here. It is currently fixed for the 1.2 patch, after the Airports DLC. But there's only one option. You can hit unlock all tiles for free. Come out of this menu and let the game read your choice. And then there you have it. Your entire map is now open. There is also a version of this mod called 25 tiles that, of course, just gives you 25 tiles instead of 81, but there's no real reason why you shouldn't go for 81 unless it's maybe a hardware problem. If your city perhaps struggles with 81 tiles, then 25 might be another alternative. But this does exactly what it says on the tin, right? Opens up the entire map for you to come out and build on. And for those that are migrating from console to PC, are in for a whole different game with 81 tiles. So definitely, if you're on the PC, you should be playing with 81 tiles. You get access to your full map for free. Next up is actually two mods together that basically work in harmony, and this is Find It and Plop the Growables. Some people will prefer to use Ploppable Rico here, but from a beginner's perspective, Plop the Growables is a lot easier to use, and you don't have to deal with Rico's interface, which again is kind of falling out of the realm of beginner-friendly mods. So, once the mod is installed, Find It, you will have a little magnifying glass down here on your toolbar. You can now filter via networks, trees, ploppables, zoning, props, and decals. This makes placing in your own custom sort of commercial high streets vastly better. Say for example, I don't like any of this commercial here. I can come in to Find It, and I can now filter via zoning type. You'll have all your high densities. It even breaks it down into DLC. You can get your green city stuff, tourism, nightlife, all your base game industry things, IT cluster. You can filter it all down here. Likewise, filtering out your custom workshop content and custom vanilla content. And you can also filter by the size of the zoning as well. So if you just want 4x4 commercial lots, then you can filter those out and then just place them in yourself. If Plop the Growables is not installed, when you place this building, it will try to grow and then delete itself. So if you're trying to replicate what I'm doing here by placing whatever commercial assets you like, then that is why. Okay, that's just the flooding from the water source, that's fine. Ignore that. Okay, so really great for customizing sort of frontage networks. So say for example, if I don't like these buildings here, let's just clear a few of them out. And then let's just have a little scroll through. I can maybe come in with some of the sort of fancier, nice looking university content creator stuff. Change my filter for the zoning. Let's go ahead and grab in one of these. And then maybe a bookstore. So you can customize exactly what appears along your commercial fronts, and also the same with whatever sort of zoning you want to do. Really good for customizing downtowns and also bringing in repeated patterns of assets that work nicely. So rather than having to wait for 3 of these 4x4 office buildings to spawn that work nicely in a repeated pattern, I can just bring 3 in and essentially create like a new unique building by piecing 3 of the same assets together. So hugely amazing. I really wish this was in the base game. Just being able to pick and choose exactly what asset you come in, and they will still work exactly as they're intended. Placing this office building, it will still want workers as if it's grown up by itself, and the same for all the others as well. So you can also filter into props and find all your little decoration points here. Again, workshop and base game assets will appear in this little list, and you can filter it through into various different themes and designs through all these filter options along the top. Within your Plop the Growables setting, within your mod settings menu, I always make sure that Plop Growables are historical, and there's also options in here for disabling the complaints that the game will give you, such as like low land value and too few services. If you're very much just using some plopped buildings for a specific type of build, and you don't want to have to deal with the warning signs, then you can do that. And then you can also set them to automatically level up, but really the one I like to do is just to make them historical. And because this is a level 1 asset, if it plopped it and it started to move up through its levels like it just has done, then of course it would change its appearance. So it just saves you having to come through and then manually make everything historical as you sort of place it down. So Ploppable Rico allows you to sort of customize the work accounts and add local save file configurations into an asset. It's a little more complicated than Plop the Growables, but for just getting started and placing in your own custom assets and manual sorts of designs like this, Find It and Plop the Growables will pair absolutely perfectly for exactly what you need here. Next up is a mod called Hide It Bobby that kind of combines multiple mods into one sort of mass configuration screen. So there is no interface for it on your game menu. You actually have to go into your options and then come across to Hide It Bobby here. There are a variety of different things you can toggle for the game. So for example, this mod will allow you to remove the seagulls without having to download the Remove Seagulls mod. And also you can hide all your different sorts of areas on the, so if you don't want like the oil area appearing up where it changes the color of the ground, you can tick that so it doesn't appear. And likewise, you can also hide your polluted areas, any burned areas, you can hide your pollution fog. And then as these options are ticked and we let the game play, you will notice that our polluted area will sort of lose that nasty brown taint that the vanilla game comes with. It's almost like a purple taint sometimes as well. So if you're really not a fan of that, Hide It Bobby adds in a lot of different configuration options as to exactly how your game sort of looks and appears, and saves you having to download 4 or 5 mods that all do the same thing. Hide It Bobby puts them all together and you can customize it to your liking. So really good. Have a look through the options, tick a few of them and see what you like. But the hide pollution effect and hide pollution fog is really appreciated for just taking that really rancid yellow tinge out of the polluted areas. Unless you enjoy it, then of course keep it on, but I don't think the vast majority of us do. So Hide It Bobby, good mod for customizing the way your game looks. So the last mod we'll cover today is actually sort of 4 mods, but they all sort of work together. I'm going to sort of group and title these as the Anarchy Mods. So coming into our roads, and we can select any road, we will now notice that with the Find Road Tools and Road Anarchy, this little box on our left will appear, okay? So with any road selected, let's have a little talk about what each of these modes does. So this first circle one is just normal, regular, vanilla game behavior. Your roads will behave with the terrain and exactly how you tell them to behave. The next option is the force to ground. No matter how high you come up, so come up by say 10 meters here, it's going to force the road to the ground, but it will still factor in the elevation. Okay, you can see the elevation changing down here with the Find Road Tools. It says 10 meters. And again, your page up and down buttons will change that value. Next one is to force elevation. So again, we can come back to 10 meters, and with this mode enabled, the road will always forced to be elevated. And then likewise, you can also force in as a bridge. The only real difference I've found with these sorts of force elevation and force bridge, which is kind of the same thing, also with the highway roads, if you wanted to force this one as elevation or force it as bridge, then you're going to be getting your big suspension cables on there as well. Okay, so if you want the highway as a bridge without the suspension cables, then you can just force it as elevation and they'll never appear. So really useful for sort of setting up road networks and working with different layers of height and sort of pre-embanking networks without having to do the terraforming yourself using the force to ground and then just changing your elevation step here. It's really cool. I really like it. And then your last option there is to also force a tunnel if that's what you wanted to do. So the Find Road Tools is really good for setting up networks. It doesn't have to be roads, it can be rail, it can be metro, any sort of transport network for getting sims around. It gives you a lot more sort of customizability and setting up different layers with the Find Road Tools. This also pairs amazingly well with Road Anarchy, which is the box below it. You can hit this option here to toggle Road Anarchy, or you can also hit Control and A. This will also turn off Road Anarchy. You will notice that Chirper will disappear or turn red when Road Anarchy is on, so that's just kind of a nice visual indication that Anarchy is on, and it's not something that you want on all the time. So what can it be used for? When the vanilla game is giving you this grief and it's like, no, it's occupied, I'm sorry, you're not coming through here. If we turn Anarchy on, then we can create and force connections that the vanilla game would not really allow us to. So the next option is toggle road bending. This is really helpful. So you'll notice that when you kind of draw out on a more than 45-degree angle in cities, the road will sort of curve, and you might not want it to. If you turn that off, then it won't, and then you can also put Anarchy on again as well, and then you're going to get these perfectly sort of straight sections here, okay? Then you can start sort of panning off networks and bringing out these larger spaces and developing your intersections, which once you're more comfortable, Node Controller and the intersection marking tool will further increase the detailing in your city in junctions like this. But while you're getting used to mods, I probably would leave Node Controller and intersection marking tool to be a little more experienced. The next one is toggle snapping, and you will see this will just turn on and off the toggle points. So you see now the road isn't connecting. You would never want to do this. It's only really used in very specific situations. And it can also be slightly confusing when you think you've connected a road in, when you haven't. So if you've not seen that sort of snap there, you can kind of see how the cursor snaps into it. That's because toggle snapping is off. Likewise with toggle road collision, if this is on, anything that is in the way of the road will be hidden and go under the road. If road collision is off, then things that are in the way of the road will stay in the road. So, you know, if you're kind of drawing through very heavily forested areas like this, and you're getting trees on the road, then you want to make sure that your collision is on, and then that's going to stop it from happening, okay? So, if you're wondering why trees are appearing when you started using these mods, and you're not sure why, that's why, because your toggle road collision in Road Anarchy is allowing the trees to collide with the road, essentially. The next Anarchy mod is Prop and Tree Anarchy, which does exactly what it says on the tin, and you will notice its status down here with Prop and Tree Anarchy. There is a new version of this mod that I will also leave linked down below as well, but please don't use both of them because I've had issues with them, so choose one or the other, but they function pretty much the same way. To turn this version on, we can hit Shift and P, and you'll see that this now changes to on, and then as we come into any sort of asset, you'll notice that you can now place bushes in it, or whatever you want. Trees, again this will work with any of your props. Maybe you want to dive into Find It and place a little bike rack somewhere. This will actually work really nicely outside of a high school if we can find one. So, you know, if you wanted to come in with some bike racks and maybe, you know, place them out the front. This is getting into the realm of sort of micro detail in here. What you can do, and it's just sort of a varying example, maybe you want to have a little kiosk outside the high school as well. Then Prop and Tree Anarchy will do all of this for you. It should also be noted that you used to be able to place trees on a road, however since the Airports DLC update where we can now upgrade the roads by clicking on them, it doesn't quite work like this anymore. So say for example, I wanted this little section of road here to have grass on it, and I wanted to draw in some palms. So because of the Airports DLC, I've added the functionality where you can click on treed roads to upgrade them into that type of tree you have selected. This doesn't really work that well anymore, but we can still place the tree, and this is where sort of combination of mods starts to come in. Using MoveIt, you can just drag it into the middle there, and then place it down. Okay? Or you can use the prop line tool, and with Tree Anarchy on within your sections, let's go for, yeah, prop line Tree Anarchy on. I can now just draw in the trees along the road, and then have them in like that instead. Okay, so you can sort of customize your own roads, place trees and props wherever you want without having the vanilla game say to you, like, no, sorry, you're not placing that there. It's just going to be a nice Anarchy mod. You'll find plenty of ways to use this for decoration points of view, and it's just a really handy one to have. And the last Anarchy mod that I suggest you get is Key Anarchy, which again will do exactly that it says on the tin, rather than having to wait for shorelines. And for those that watched episode 10 of the Noob's Guide, where we were very precisely chiseling out all these little key patterns using dirt road frames in the vanilla game, Key Anarchy will allow you to place a key wherever the hell you want, and it's amazing. This brings in so many more possibilities. For example, if you're playing with some sort of tiered layer here like I am, I've got 2 layers of tourism, I can now bring in a key over here if I like to run all the way through, and then you can essentially use it as like a retaining wall, right? With Key Anarchy on like this. It's amazing. Really great mod, and especially works just so well with all of the content creator keys, especially the ones with the stairs on them, if you are playing with them. There is no shortcut to activate Key Anarchy. It is kind of permanently on all the time. But you can see the effect, right? And then you would obviously come in and sort of terraform this away to reveal the back end of those keys. So you can really start to see the possibilities that all these very small, just slight changes to the game engine are going to bring to you. Okay, and then you can have some stairs and, you know, feed pathways into this, and just create another little layer of detail within every single one of your builds by starting to introduce keys where you don't need to follow a shoreline in order to use them. Amazingly useful. So I would certainly suggest that you grab the Prop and Tree Anarchy, the Road Anarchy, and the Key Anarchy mods all at the same time, because they all provide anarchy for each of their respective counterparts. Okay guys, that is going to do it for my sort of top 10 quality of life and base game improvement mods None of them are really that complicated here, and if you do want to start getting into the realm of modding, then there are some really cool and interesting designs out there. If you're feeling a little more comfortable with these, I would suggest you go and check out maybe Node Controller intersection marking tool as well. I do have a tutorial on how to use the intersection marking tool. I'll leave that link down below as well. And please don't forget there are also other tutorials linked below too. If you want to find out absolutely everything that MoveIt can do, Slay3K's MoveIt video is by far the best way of learning the mod. It's how I learnt it. That's linked down below. If you want to see what Node Controller can do, Yumble does some really nice things with Node Controller. His videos will also be down below. And Beautify Our Builds is also another honourable mention for customizing vanilla assets, and Few Candy has a fantastic tutorial on Beautify Our Builds, which again is linked down below. If you have any questions or indeed are having trouble with any of these mods, please feel free to pop them in the comments below. And we also have a modded support section in our Discord if you aren't in there already. Again, it's linked down below. So if you're having trouble and you're not quite sure what's going on, come and say hello to us in Discord and we'll help you get your modded game set up so it's working correctly. But otherwise, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and as always, enjoy the rest of your day.